So again, good afternoon. It's not morning anymore, and happy Earth Day to all of you. Thanks again for joining us. Today, in addition to celebrating Earth Day, we are gathering to celebrate another accomplishment that have been quite an important and critical milestone for our green city in our attempt to be a greener and more livable city. It's an effort that has essentially compiled multiple departments and agencies together to further green our city in both capturing our environmental and as well as aesthetic benefits. Many of us have been working together in making sure that every single development around the city is incorporating various green strategies that is essentially proven strategy, not only improve our environment, it makes social and as well as economic sense. It does improve very much our quality of life around the area. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our green champion, Mayor Gavin Newsom.
Thanks, Astrid. Thank you guys for Happy Earth Day. Did you know it was Earth Day?
Oh, yeah.
You're wearing green, so I suspected. A rhetorical question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. And we were questioning whether or not even to do this public event because we're not necessarily expecting fanfare in terms of enthusiastic reporting that would be done around a landscape ordinance, because I think most people would just sort of go off and say, what's the big deal? Except that I really do believe this is a big deal, so we decided to challenge folks by coming together because this marks a significant milestone in our city's future. It's the beginning of a new approach to focus on the quality of life in this city by focusing on the quality of our streetscapes, the quality of our urban fabric in a much more prescriptive and I think a much more enlightened way. Let me back up. A number of years ago, I had the privilege of going to Chicago and going down Michigan Avenue in Chicago and was blown away about how beautiful that experience was, and so impressed by the details of that city, by the investment into things large and small. Not only was the city clean, at least down Michigan Avenue, not only was it impressive that there were beautiful planted flowers both on the sidewalk in the median strips, but it was the attention to details like this. Everywhere I looked, I saw, it was what I didn't see, I guess is what I should say more eloquently. I didn't see chain-linked fences. I saw wrought iron fences. I saw small, beautiful fences surrounding the planted flowers. I saw sort of layers as it relates to how things were planted, and they were in different layers, different shapes. And it reminded me, candidly, a lot of traveling in Europe a little bit when I was younger and going to Paris. And I was on my way to meet the mayor, Mayor Daley, and I marked my expression of appreciation, and he said, well, you know, I stole all these ideas from Paris. And I was there many, many years ago, and I came back thinking the same thing. Why do we have all these chain link fences? Why do we have all of these? Well, why don't we create a discipline around a different aesthetic for our city? He said it took almost a decade. It didn't happen overnight, but it took years and years of a disciplined effort. When changes were made, they were made with a basis and an understanding that there needed to be a certain aesthetic, that it wasn't about costing more money, it wasn't about being superfluous, it wasn't about being, you know, of sort of getting away from the core values and the core functions of government. But from his perspective, it was the core function of government. That in the 21st century, I remember this conversation so vividly, said in the 21st century, that cities will be competing with cities. And he was absolutely right. This was years ago. It won't be states competing with states or nations competing with nations. And they're going to compete on the basis of quality of life. And that the success of your city is going to find by having attributes that define it, that distinguish it, that make it more appropriate place for people to live and work and to recreate. And that these things matter. And that we need to make bigger, we need to focus on these things, we need to emphasize these more, and we need to make a stronger investment. That stuck with me. What also stuck with me is that as a new mayor, I didn't necessarily have the tools to make this happen, and that we had not done a lot of the discipline and the work. I found out about their landscaping ordinance. I found out about their beautification strategies and how formal they were. And I found out this person, Astrid Hayardi, was one of the people leading the charge. And Astrid just introduced me. We were able, about 9 months after that meeting, to steal Astrid away from Chicago. And she came out here with a very specific charge, basically to steal all those darn good ideas that we had in Chicago, but make them our own, recognizing San Francisco's not Chicago. And candidly, we were a lot farther ahead than Chicago was, and candidly is. Chicago was a bunch of train stations and all sort of flat. We have so many more attributes in terms of their topography and the surrounding environment that we didn't necessarily need to go back to the beginning. We had so much to build on, but we needed to advance some discipline. And that's where a Better Streets plan took shape, working with the planning department and others. And we created a framework for great streets and better streets, and started focusing on trees on Alamany Boulevard, and the work that we just got done finally 5 years later on Divisadero and Portola, and work we're doing now in Valencia, and the work that's being done next year at Caesars. I mean, I can go on and on. Every diverse part of our city, all of these things. I mean, they're happening with a strong narrative and a real focus and discipline. But the last big piece was this Green Landscape Ordinance. What was fortuitous is the timing worked to where we were trying to do some different things with the Public Utilities Commission on wastewater, and making sure that we're resupplying through permeable surfaces our groundwater systems as opposed to allowing all this stuff to flood off and end up in the ocean. And we decided to combine those disciplines. We slowed this landscaping ordinance down, and we started to merge these disciplines with Supervisor Carmen Chu, Supervisor Bevan Dufty, and others. And so that's a long-winded, I get it, but a long-winded sort of introduction to where we are. And I do think it's a big deal. And I do think that people will get it 10, 15 years from now. They may not fully appreciate it now because it doesn't mean much now. But as this city continues to evolve, it's going to evolve in a different way. That you can't put up this asphalt going right out to the sidewalk and just have a bunch of parking spaces. That if you're going to put asphalt to sidewalk parking, you got to have trees. You got to have some setbacks. You have to green the area. You have to be respectful of the urban environment, and respectful of the neighbors, and respectful of the pedestrians and the bicyclists. And that's fundamentally what this does. It just says, here's some guidelines, some common sense, and here's some things that will improve your property values, improve the surrounding property values, improve our quality of life, and improve this city and the experience people have in the city. And that's why I say I think this is a big deal. And I think in a decade or two, people will come to appreciate it. They may not remember where this started, but they'll come to appreciate the work that we did. What I also am appreciative of is that the business community, development community came together with us. Usually these things, they look at it and go, oh, you're just costing me more money, more rules and regulation. And I just think the planning department and others, and we worked so closely, I mean, from the residential builders to on down, small and large. And they said, you know what, we support this. This, actually, you're right, this increases our sales price. It increases our rentals. It increases the quality of experience, which is good business. And everyone came together, and here we are celebrating all that work and really sharing the notion that we should be doing more best practice. And I appreciate Carmen Chu again for her willingness to take this on. There was some risk at taking this on initially because of the reaction some people may have that it was burdensome and costly, and that risk was mitigated by the outreach and her leadership. And so again, I'm thankful to her and the entire board, and to Astrid and her vision and leadership and planning, and everybody that worked through a process to make this happen. And I think ultimately the city's going to be better off because of it. So that's why we're here. That was not off any talking points. There lacked any eloquence, or it was so hardly succinct, but I hope it came across sincere. And with that, let me ask someone who's much more succinct that can walk through the legislative pratfalls and process, and ask Carmen Chu to come up, Supervisor Chu, and thank you again for your leadership and making this happen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for being out here and for the mayor and his staff for being out here, to, of course, the Planning Commission and also Planning Department for work that they've done, for Astrid, the work that she's done on this issue, in addition to all the advocates and community leaders who are part of this effort. Overall, one of the things that I do want to say is that I believe that this legislation is something that really helps the city move forward. It might not be able to change existing conditions for existing buildings unless there's a significant improvement or change in the building, but what we're going to see going forward with the city is that as we have new developments take place, significant renovations or changes occur, we're really going to begin to see some stewardship about the environment, making sure that we have more permeable spaces, spaces where water can actually go back down and recharge the groundwaters is something that's very important. In the Sunset District, the district that I represent, we actually have a district that has a lot of concrete in front of our homes. Many people have paved over their front yards in order to allow for spaces for parking and for maintenance reasons, but the impact on that has been that we've had a very, very big impact on our sewer system. Our sewer system can no longer truly be able to capture all the rainwater runoff that occurs when you have no space for the water to go. And so I think this legislation, combined with some of the greening efforts, with the permeable landscaping components, will really go a long ways towards making sure that as we're moving forward with development, that we do it in a responsible way, in a way that thinks and takes into account our water systems and our environment. So I couldn't be more happy that we have passed the legislation on the full Board of Supervisors, and my colleagues have supported the legislation, and again, thank everybody who's been involved.
Well done. Thank you, Ashley.
Well, before we do the actual signing, I want to also point it out one of the reasons why this site is actually chosen for our today's celebration of Earth Day and the Landscape Ordinance. You can see how the vision start to take shape here in the area, the tree-lined streets that essentially exemplify new development and any kind of development physically contributing to the greening of the city. Stormwater features right behind me that essentially capture an extra water flow from the big rainwater that actually go into the specific area in the landscape. Everything done in a very well designed and enjoyable place. Is not the kind of engineering type of solution that is probably stark for many. It's the kind of thing that people can enjoy and understand beyond beyond its utilitarian uses and function, but also for the enjoyment of everyone's on the ground. So I have Terry Milne, our president of Urban Forest Council, want to share with you a brief remarks.
I'm here representing the Urban Forest Council, and when this ordinance came before us for recommendation several weeks ago, our council unanimously passed it because we figure this is one of the best ways that we can increase the urban forest in San Francisco, and particularly the details of being able to improve the canopies on the big blank asphalt parking lots that we have today. And we figure the more green cover we can get over hard surfaces, the better it will be for the city. Also, the permeable paving is going to be good for trees that are already planted, because if we get more groundwater returned, they'll be able to nourish the trees that we have now. So we thought this was one of the best ways that would cover the whole city and improve the urban forest.
Thank you, Terry. So in addition to our Urban Forest Council members and planning departments, thank you, Larry and Anne-Marie, and thank you for your support as well from the Commission, as well as Tommy from PUC, from the Public Utility Commission and his wastewater enterprise and water enterprise, and the effort and the support of our effort here specifically in emphasizing a more responsible use of water while we're landscaping. So it is we should actually continue to promote and use appropriate type of planting that is essentially connect to your context, an appropriate choice of planting that also relate to whether you're in the drought tolerant type of zone or a wet zone. So that's the kind of thing that Landscape Ordinance also continue to encourage to do. And the Department of Public Works for the connection between Landscape Ordinance and the various regulations that support them. And thank you again for the effort, and Department of the Environment as well, and the support in making sure our policies are lined up in all aspects of that, vertically and horizontally. And of course for our volunteer designer Megan Kelly and Pallavi Gandhi, who's actually helping with the user manual. We do have user manual for residents to make sure that they can actually understand well in a later person term in regards to how to follow this regulation, and we have copies of that. We also have that linked actually in planning department.
This was a big deal, because how do you translate all this fancy planning code stuff, right? You know, so I mean, no one understands that stuff. And in Chicago, you guys had this amazing thing where it just showed schematics of how that translates. So we, because of your outstanding work, thank you, did exactly the same thing. So this makes it understandable what the heck we're talking about. And then you could see the sort of before and afters of the schematic. And why would you ever argue for the status quo or yesterday when you can have something much more aesthetically pleasing and valuable and meaningful and iconic? Is that fair to say, iconic? In the sunset. The icon, though, is in the sunset, right, is all those paved parking, you know, people paving over their grass, and, you know, we're worried about drought and all these things, and there's just a third way here. There's a different way of achieving the same results, and I think everyone I talk to, they want to underground the wires, and they want to get rid of, they want more trees out there, they want a different aesthetic, and want to see their property values increase. Who doesn't? Tax base increases in the city, more money for social services, investing in people and place. Everyone's the beneficiary of this, and that's why, again, this ordinance matters, but also this easy to understand, easy to read and review guide. We appreciate your work. Thank you. Sorry, I jumped in.
No, that's great, and thank you again for all support, and Friends of Urban Forest as well for your efforts. And unless I'm mistaken, anyone, are we ready to sign the legislation?
Yes, indeed. All right.
Oh, it's on the board.
It's our table. I like this. That's a good idea. It's official.
All right.
It shall be the policy of the city. Where's your ordinance pen?
All right.
Yes, I know. Throw it out. I know. Yeah, whatever. Excellent. That's it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
to your
Thank you all
effort.
for coming out.
Hey, before you go.